Greetings, everybody. Here we are on Module 15B. We are on page 97 of your lab book. And this should be a shorter lecture today, and we should be able to finish up 15 pretty quickly. All right, let's start with a little review from last time. Okay, we're looking at how our limited resources must be managed, how important that is to keep everything in balance, right? So for instance, when we're looking at our economic zones, we can see those off the side of the country. And I have this picture to remind you right here. Remember, all these areas are the USA legal areas to do our fishing. All right, so we'll be looking for ways to keep those supplied and not to overfish them and things like this. So mariculture, here's our first blank for the day. All right, you're going to put in mariculture. It's essentially a fancy word for fish farming. Some people call it aquaculture. And this idea was brought about so that we could control things a little bit better, that we could keep the fish in a certain place so we could catch them more easily, we could breed them and have more of them, and then hopefully not do any overfishing. Now, sadly, there have been problems with it, and we're going to explore some of those. We actually talked about a little of them last time, but we're going to look at some now. Let's watch our just an introduction here into fish farming.
For 3 billion people around the world, seafood provides a significant source of protein and nutrition. But recent studies show that 33% of wild fisheries are overfished, while another 60% are fished at their maximum capacity. In fact, over half the seafood we eat, from finfish and shellfish to seaweed and algae, isn't caught in the wild. It's grown through aquaculture, or aquatic farming. Farmed seafood is one of the fastest growing food industries, expanding in volume by 5.8% each year. But different methods of aquaculture come with different advantages and issues, some of which echo the serious problems we've seen in industrial agriculture. So how can we avoid repeating the mistakes we've made on land at sea? What aquaculture approaches are we currently using, and what does a sustainable way to farm the ocean really look like? One of the most common aquaculture methods involves large pens made of nets, where fish are farmed offshore in floating cages, roughly 1,000 square meters in size. Commonly employed off the coast of Chile and in the fjords of Norway, these fish, like many industrially farmed animals, occupy stressful, overcrowded pens. They produce massive amounts of waste, polluting the surrounding areas and potentially spreading diseases to wild species. Worse still, since the antibiotics employed to fight disease aren't fully absorbed by the fish, they get excreted back into the environment. Net pens are also susceptible to escapes, unleashing huge numbers of fish which compete for resources and weaken the local gene pool with genes adapted for captivity. Escaped fish can even disrupt local ecosystems as invasive species. Other techniques, such as man-made coastal ponds commonly used for shrimp farming in Southeast Asia, create additional environmental problems. Just like net pens, these ponds are prone to spreading pollution and disease. Their construction also frequently destroys important ecosystems like mangroves and marshes, which protect coastal areas from storms, provide habitats, and absorb tons of greenhouse gases. One way to solve these problems is to farm fish on land in completely contained systems. Tanks and raceways can recirculate and filter water to prevent pollution. But even fully contained facilities still contend with another major hurdle: fish meal. About 10% of the seafood caught globally is used to feed animals, including carnivorous farmed fish. Researchers are working on fish feed made of insects and plant-based proteins, but for now, many inland fish farms are connected to overfishing. All these obstacles can make sustainable aquaculture feel a long way off, but innovative farmers are finding new ways to responsibly farm the seas. The most promising solution of all may be to look lower on the food chain. Instead of cramming large carnivorous fish into pens, we can work with natural ocean systems to produce huge amounts of shellfish and seaweeds. These low-maintenance flora and fauna don't need to be fed at all. In fact, they naturally improve water quality, filtering it as they feed off of sunlight and nutrients in the seawater. By absorbing carbon through photosynthesis, these farms help battle climate change and reduce local ocean acidification while creating habitats for other species to thrive. Shifting to restorative ocean farming could provide good jobs for coastal communities, and support healthy plant and shellfish-based diets that have an incredibly low carbon footprint. In just 5 months, 4,000 square meters of ocean can produce 25 tons of seaweed and 250,000 shellfish. With the right distribution network, a series of small farms collectively the size of Washington state could feed the planet. Farms like these are already popping up around the globe, and a new generation of farmers is stepping up to pursue a more sustainable future. Done properly, regenerative ocean farming could play a vital role in helping our oceans, our climate, and ourselves.
Okay, so we covered some of this last time again, where it seems to me like we have a lot of repetition here in this lecture. But anyway, these are some of the challenges. That was introducing you to some of the challenges. Okay, so in your blank about, what are some of these challenges, one of them will be that we overfish. So our sustainable yield is compromised, and we go beyond our maximum sustainable yield. Remember those from last time. And we end up with other problems, right? We have the bycatch over here. We have the problems with the buildup of toxins and treating the animals with antibiotics and this kind of things. So that's one of the challenges we have to deal with as far as being responsible, the overfishing. So therefore, so we're looking at the net catching right there. So then these farms came up as an idea to try to overcome this overfishing, which created some of its own problems. All right. So for instance, in Japan, they're pretty much traditionally fishing. They do have farms and things, but they lots of fishermen go out and fish. We talked last time about how they're an island nation, and therefore the ocean is all around them. Therefore, they do eat a lot of seafood. So we can't do much about another country that tends to overfish. All right, but we can put some pressure on them from political means. Also, these groups that are out there protesting the overfishing and things like that can pressure them that way. This is going to be just a video talking about one of the fish markets in Japan, which is very popular.
Browsing through the specimens on sale, bidders here at Tokyo's Tsukiji Fish Market get ready to welcome in 2016. They're about to take part in an important Japanese tradition, the auction of the first bluefin tuna fish of the year, an endangered species caught off Japan's north coast. Seen as an auspicious start to the new year, this first fish always sells for way over its true value. This year's prestigious catch hits 200 kilograms on the scales. After some frantic bidding, it goes to the president of a popular sushi restaurant chain for some 108,000 euros. It's this man's 5th consecutive year winning the auction. However, next year, the tradition's set to become a whole new kettle of fish. Tsukiji Market has stood here for 8 decades, but was soon moved to a new modernized site.
In recent years, the economic situation surrounding the market has been tough, but we are grateful to the Tsukiji Fish Market for the past 80 years. We're looking ahead to a bright future.
But it's unclear for how long that future will include the famous bluefin tuna auction. Japan faces growing calls for a trade ban on the species, which environmentalists warn is on the path to extinction. Japan consumes about 80% of all bluefin tuna caught worldwide, and the growing popularity of sushi around the globe has increased demand elsewhere. Conservation experts warn populations have now been decimated to just 4% of unfished levels.
All right, and one of the other things that is quite popular in Japan is this idea of shark finning. Okay, so there was a video for this, and I just couldn't stand it. It was so horrible. It just made me squeamish. So I didn't put it in here. What they do is they'll actually catch the sharks and off the side of the boat. Then they'll take the fin off of them. They'll cut the fins off. You can see here the pink ones. They'll cut those off, and then they'll just throw the shark back in the water. They don't use the rest of its meat. The poor thing can't swim anymore. We know what happens to sharks when they can't swim, right? They're going to suffocate, because they can't pull water past their gills. And so they just throw them in there. And the reason they do that is because there's a very famous and and sought after dish called shark fin soup. This is apparently it, where they take that fin and then obviously treat it in some way. It looks like it's in a dumpling or something like that, and it's a delicacy, and people pay big bucks for it, and it's just, I'm sorry. I know that sharks are, can be, they can hurt people and this kind of stuff, but I just think, why don't they just keep the rest of the meat, and make shark, steaks out of it or something? I don't know. Y'all might disagree with me, but I don't think I'll ever eat shark fin soup. All right. So back to management. What can we do? We can have laws passed for our own, country, so we can do that. We can dedicate ourselves to not do any shark finning, this kind of thing. Then global pressure, spreading awareness. Those would be those groups that would go around and just, insert a plea for this and say to other countries, can we try something else? Can we try harvesting the whole shark? Something like that. So we need to harvest responsibly here. So we're looking here at, it looks like, I guess, a salmon or something like that. And we know that salmon are farmed. We also know that salmon are caught wild, and the wild ones are the most healthy for you. So let's look at our mariculture systems then. Okay, so aquaculture, right, the other word. It includes mariculture, which is farming and harvesting of marine animals and plants. So open mariculture, you're going to have this on one of your blanks right here, and try to, as far as open and closed, we're going to see what we think the difference, what's better here. So in open mariculture, we have a system where the natural area is farmed. There's there's protection from predators, and organisms are fed to and bred to be harvested. Okay, so they're left in their natural area, and they're protected in some way. Some sort of fences or something like this are put up, and that's open mariculture. This is an example of one right here. Okay, so these fish, they're in their natural habitat, and then they're put into this sort of giant floating cage. All right, here's another example right there. And I think we have a video here that's going to show this net penning.
A popular way to farm raise fish is to use net pens or net cages. These pens are placed directly into the water and anchored to the bottom. Net pen aquaculture operations raise several conservation concerns. Water flows freely through the pens and can carry waste and chemicals like pesticides into the local environment. In addition, there's the potential threat of disease transfer from the farmed fish to wild fish that swim past the pens. This can be of particular concern for juvenile fish. In the event of storm or predator damage to the netting, farmed fish can escape. These escaped fish can cause a variety of potential problems, depending on the species that's being farmed. When farmed fish escape, they can interbreed with wild fish populations, compete for food, prey on native species, and transmit disease. There are ways to mitigate some of these concerns. Many types of seafood can be farmed in systems that are less open to the environment, like land-based recirculating tanks. Or net pen farms can be located in areas where there are no sensitive wild fish populations, or where the nutrient wastes can be shown not to have a significant impact. It's also possible to grow other species around the net pens, like mussels or seaweeds, that can filter or absorb some of the wastes produced by the fish in the net pens.
Okay, so that repeated some of the stuff in our first video. And you can see here, now we're going to look at the closed mariculture. So this is where the farmer is in complete control of the area and can control production, environmental factors, and this thing, usually done in tanks. So I think that this is the difference we're going to see here between the open and the closed, is that the open is out in the natural area, although in that last video it sounded like they can bring those to other areas, right? They're not in their native habitat. And then the closed mariculture would be more in a tank, okay, where they can control production, environmental factors, they can drain the stuff out. Stocking with salmon is done this way as well, but salmon, tend to prefer to swim back to their birthplace for spawning and that kind of thing. But they can do it this way. They can stock them in closed mariculture. So now the question for you is, which one of these is better? Well, so this one, I don't know if these are tanks or nets. It's hard to tell from this particular angle. All right. So here's a net down here. Here's some of those risks. then waste products, the overcrowding, the escape, those kind of things. This is an interesting story about rebranding. So this fish that we're looking at right here is called tilapia. You may have had tilapia, and we may have spoken about it before. I can't remember. But I think tilapia is delicious. Here's the problem. It's basically 100% farmed. And we may have talked about this when we talked about how it can withstand higher temperatures of water. I know, that it also is a vegetarian. It eats algae. And so some people use it in tanks. When I say tanks, I mean ponds, to help the algae population, to keep it down so the water will stay, fresher, so the algae won't crowd everything else out. Sometimes in warm ponds, algae grows too fast, and these tilapia can keep that algae growth down, and that's good. So the fish had some crazy name, some awful name, and they changed the name to tilapia to make it sound a little more, a little less horrible. I'll have to look that up and see what that name was. But when they rebranded it and they started selling it, it was being used to help keep these ponds clean, and they started to sell it to people. It's got a very mild flavor, and it's I think very good. People who don't like fish will like tilapia typically because it doesn't have as fishy a flavor. And now tilapia has become one of the best-selling fish around. Okay, so we're looking also at other living resources and non-living resources, and you're going to have some of these. So I'm skipping over the other living resources for a second. We're to non-living resources. There are lots of medicines that are harvested from the ocean, whether they come from animals or the plants or the algae that are in the ocean. But it's quite a large a group of medicines. All right, so here we are for our other living resources. Oyster pearls. You never think about that, really. Coral shells, seaweed. So some of those things, like our oysters, those are for, jewelry and stuff like this. We use kelp for many things. Some people will use kelp for a thickening agent in various food substances, but then also for eating, in sushi and things like that. And then I never really thought about this. You got to get your aquarium fish from somewhere, right? So somebody's raising them so they can sell them to a pet store, so you can go to a pet store and buy them, So those are other living resources that are found. Here's somebody picking up some shells. So shells are a commodity, even though some people just collect them for fun. I have my little collection and this kind of thing. Other people use them for commercial uses, like they'll make art out of them, or pieces of furniture like lamps and things like this out of shells. And then of course sport fishing. If any of you all been out for any deep sea fishing, you have to get out there when the waves are big, and I went out once and I got pretty seasick. So I've never been seasick, never before that time or since that time, but once you've been seasick, you don't want to try it again. So I have no interest in going out deep sea fishing. I did catch one of the fish. I was determined to do that, but I felt sick the whole time. I'm not sure what this fish is, but it is very cool looking. What about the aquariums? So here's the Texas State Aquarium. That, of course, is for educational purposes. We go to an aquarium to see the fish that somebody brought there, right? Somebody caught it and carefully transported it into the state aquarium. This was one of the places that we would have maybe tried to get to. I don't know if we would have had time to get down there, but we would have been close to the state aquarium if we'd gone down to the coast. I will tell you this, that managing in the aquarium, I think we talked about this, is a big job. Zoologists would be in there taking care of these creatures because they're, not in their natural habitat, so therefore their environment has to be very, controlled, and they have to keep track of everything in there, salinity and temperature and all that kind of thing. And I know the last time, so 2 years ago when we were going to go down, the aquarium was not open, and the reason is the large tank, which held all their large fish, all their sharks, things like this, they had an infestation of a little mite that got into the fish. I believe it was infesting their gills, and of course that would cause problems, right? So they had basically a respiratory problem. They had a flu, if you will, going on with their fish. And so they talked to somebody about getting some medication to these fish. They took some of the fish out and tested the medication on them to see if it worked and didn't hurt the fish. And it worked. And they said, okay, well, now we're going to give this medication to all the fish in this big tank. Well, somebody's math was off, and their math calculations ended up putting way too much of this medication into the tank. And so they overdosed them, and all of the fish in the big tank died. It was horrible. And of course they felt horrible. They found their mistake, and it was an innocent mistake, but they felt so irresponsible. For the longest time they had to rebuild their stock, and that's why they ended up closing the aquarium for a while. They did have other aquaria around the country who did offer to lend certain fish to our aquarium because they all felt badly for them. And I'm not sure if they ever did any borrowing, but I'm pretty sure now that this Texas State Aquarium has recovered and that they're open for business, and you can go see the big tanks and everything. But lesson learned there, they have to be super careful with these creatures and take care of them so carefully. Here's somebody at an aquarium. I recently went to one in Milwaukee. I was waiting for a flight, and we got to go to the aquarium, and it was so cool because you'd be standing there and they would swim above you, over the top of you. Yeah, so beautiful. Some cities have some pretty amazing aquaria. Here are some fish that you might buy if you have a little home aquarium, so you go to a pet store and pick those up. I don't know, probably most of us had some time in our life where we picked up a fish, and they send it to you in a bag, and they make sure there's air in the top of it. You take it home, and you have to gradually add them to your water so that the water is acclimated to the fish and this kind of thing. All right, and we also have non-living resources in the ocean, quite a few in fact. Right here we're looking at a picture of a mining tool that is down under at the seafloor, mining certain minerals. So we can find minerals that are more prevalent down at the ocean, and here's a boat, of course, that's sitting down to get that. Now they're going to be digging away there and harvesting that, taking it up through this like suction area up into here, and then using it however they're going to use it. And you can see here that it can cause some problems. Here we have some getting into the habitat and ruining some of that. Sometimes the noise will scare some of these away and this kind of thing. Salt is a big non-living resource that we find from the ocean. You've probably heard of Himalayan salt, right? That comes from the mountain region, but most of the world's salt comes from an ocean region. I know that the country of Mali, for instance, is a big salt area there. It's inland. It's kind of interesting. They must have been covered by ocean at some point in time. But they're going to take the salt and sell that, because even though we don't really preserve food with salt as much as we did in the old days before refrigeration, we certainly use salt quite a bit for flavoring our foods. So what about salt water? We know that the vast majority of the water on the planet is salt water, and that is not potable. We cannot drink that. And I think I told you at the beginning of the year, if you figured out a efficient way of turning salt water into fresh water, you become a millionaire. I think it's true. We can desalinate water. We can make fresh water from salt water. It is a long process. Sometimes it's more expensive than that it's not worth it anymore because it takes so much money to do that. Lots of people are looking for ways to do it more cheaply. Okay, so we're going to look at this process right here that you see the picture on the screen right now. I'm going to show you a little video, but I wanted to show you this first. This is a computer chip. It is apparently being developed by the University of Texas at Austin, Hook'em Horns, and it somehow is able to use some sort of electricity to get the salt out of the water. It's not on the market yet. They're still working on it. But the idea here is to use electricity and to use a computer program to actually help take some of the salt out of it. I don't know exactly how they do it. It's pretty fascinating. But let's watch how we just do a regular, I believe, reverse osmosis process here.
As the Earth's population continues to grow and develop, our limited freshwater resources become increasingly scarce. We are fortunate that the Earth's oceans offer an alternative and can provide a sustainable supply of potable water. Seawater can be economically and reliably converted to potable water through a process known as seawater reverse osmosis. The process starts by extracting water from the ocean using wells located on the shoreline or by using an intake structure located in the open ocean. Osmosis is a naturally occurring process where a solvent, such as water, passes through a semi-permeable barrier. The semi-permeable barrier, or membrane, allows some things to pass through it, but not others. In nature, the direction of flow through the membrane is from a less concentrated solution, such as fresh water, to a more concentrated solution, such as seawater, until equilibrium is reached. Reverse osmosis is when the opposite occurs. By pressurizing the concentrated solution, the seawater, we are able to force water molecules to pass from the salty seawater solution through the membrane to the fresh water. To protect the reverse osmosis membranes from becoming clogged by solid particles that can be suspended in the seawater is filtered before passing through the membranes. This is accomplished by using multimedia filters, which are tanks or vessels containing a series of layered granular materials. These materials can be anthracite, garnet, sand, pebbles, and/or gravel, which are assembled in layers. The filters remove sand, twigs, seaweed, and other particles from the seawater. In some cases, other types of membranes, known as ultrafiltration and microfiltration membranes, are used instead of multimedia filters to pre-treat the seawater. Next, the filtered seawater travels to the cartridge filters, which act as a second stage of filtration. Cartridge filters used for seawater reverse osmosis are typically made from a yarn-like synthetic material that is wound into cartridges. These remove even smaller solid particles from the seawater, such as fine sand and clay, before the seawater proceeds to the reverse osmosis membranes. High-pressure pumps increase the pressure of the seawater up to 1,000 psi. The pressure needs to be sufficiently high to overcome the naturally occurring osmotic pressure and force water from the saltwater side through the reverse osmosis membranes to the freshwater side. The salt particles in the seawater are rejected from passing through the membrane to the freshwater side and remain behind on the concentrated saltwater side. The reverse osmosis membrane can be thought of as a number of sealed envelopes connected at their open ends to a tube. There are spacers between each envelope which allow water to flow across the membranes. The membrane envelopes and spacers are then wound around the tube like a roll of paper towels. The reverse osmosis membranes are then enclosed in a fiberglass shell. The membranes are connected end to end, usually 6 to 7 membranes together, and housed in vessels that are built to withstand pressures up to 1,200 psi. As the pressurized seawater enters the pressure vessel and flows across the membrane surface, the water molecules are forced into and through the membrane envelopes, leaving the salt molecules behind. The desalted water passes through the membrane and emerges at low pressure, where it is collected in a tube and directed to one end of the pressure vessel. The concentrated salt stream that is rejected from flowing through the membrane continues to pass across the membrane surface, where it is collected separately. The concentrated salt stream retains about 55% of the total energy of the seawater stream that was originally fed to the membranes. To reduce the energy that is required to operate the reverse osmosis plant, the pressurized concentrated stream is piped into an energy recovery device. Here, up to 98% of the energy of the concentrated salt stream is transferred to an equal volume of the incoming seawater in an isobaric energy recovery device. The energy recovery device significantly reduces the plant's operating costs by recovering the concentrated salt stream energy and using it to pressurize 60% of the seawater that is fed to the membranes. The concentrated salt stream will have about a 60% higher salinity than the incoming seawater. The concentrated salt stream is sent back to the ocean through a brine disposal well, or a device known as a brine outfall. The brine outfall is situated in an area of significant ocean flow so that the salt levels are quickly returned to equilibrium with the ocean. The location for the outfall should contain no sensitive marine ecosystems. In a properly designed brine outfall, no noticeable increase in salinity can be detected at a distance of a few meters from the discharge. The pressurized seawater leaving the energy recovery device has its pressure boosted by a small booster pump so that it is at the same pressure as the seawater leaving the high-pressure pump. The boost is necessary as some pressure has been lost as the stream travels through the reverse osmosis system. Approximately 40% of the seawater that enters the system is converted to potable water during the reverse osmosis process. The potable water is further treated by adding calcium carbonate to improve the taste and bring the pH to the neutral range. Chlorine is also injected to provide disinfection properties as the water travels from the reverse osmosis plant through the distribution pipes to homes and businesses. When proper conservation of natural water resources is practiced, water reuse has been applied, and a water deficit still remains. Seawater reverse osmosis can offer a sustainable alternative. With good stewardship, it can provide life-sustaining water for coastal communities. Desalted water supplies, which are not susceptible to drought and other natural disasters, can provide a clean, safe potable water supply.
Okay, did you get all that? One thing I wanted you to know from that is that desalinating water is not a simple process. It's a very complex process. And if that is supposed to be efficient and inexpensive, I don't know. You know, maybe once it's set up, it could be done that way. But we're still looking for something cheaper and simpler to do it. There's the whole, boil the water and let it condense and then collect the condensed water. But the energy it takes to boil water is so much that it ends up being cost ineffective. All right, so it is a problem. All right. Oil is one of the big commodities that we get from the ocean. We're digging into the ocean floor all the time to try to bring up oil, and oil can be, the world turns on oil essentially. We've seen them off the Gulf of Mexico. If you go down there to the coast, you can look off into the distance and see them out there. You can see their lights blinking at night, but you can see there's lots of them out there because guess what? We have a lot of oil in the Gulf of Mexico, and we can use that oil to make our gasoline for our cars and keep our prices down, right? They're common, the rigs are, and let's take a look at a video.
This is aerial video of an offshore oil rig. Since 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by ocean, it's not surprising that there are many oil deposits accessible only by offshore. Almost all of the country's oil resources are located offshore. If the country wants to lessen its dependence on foreign oil, then it must do offshore drilling from offshore rigs like this one. Of course, to be responsible, these rigs must have safeguards to protect the environment.
Because the oil is seeping out of the ocean floor naturally, but when we tap into it, sometimes there can be accidents where the oil can be released in large amounts. And if there's a large amount of oil, then that can, of course, be a problem. It floats, and when it gets to the surface, it will, birds will get caught in it and entangled in it and all, weighed down by it and kill them, So we need to take care of them that way. All right, so today would have been our tasting party, okay? So I would have had this extra time here at the end of the class to be cooking for you. You can see some various things right there. I don't know what some of those things even are, right? Some sort of lobster, I guess. I would have made for sure, I would have brought some shrimp. And cold shrimp, and dip it in the red sauce. That's good. That's easy to deal with because I could cook it and then keep it cold. I would always cook shrimp that came from the Gulf of Mexico, from Texas. So Texas brown shrimp. That way you know that it was caught wild, possibly in the Bay Area over there. But it wasn't. It's not farmed. So that's the only shrimp that I trust to eat personally. Also, I would have brought some salmon, and the salmon I get is the fancy, Alaskan sockeye, expensive stuff. I probably would have cooked a few of those and brought them. We would have split them up. I'm not sure how y'all feel about seafood. I would have also made, I actually have them already because I had them frozen, scallops, and I cook scallops in the sous vide. That is this process where you put them in a bag and you put them in this hot water and they cook for a time, then you pull them out and you sear them and eat them. And I tell you what, they are delicious. The last time I made them, there was one student who said, "Oh, I don't want to have it." And I said, "Well, give it to me." And it was, so good. So now I have all those at my house here, and I'll make them for my family. And so we're going to eat those scallops. I probably would not have gotten any lobster. It's expensive. Not as many people like it. And so I would have just tried, so I would have had that shellfish, that would have been the shrimp and the scallop. I would have had the fin fish, would be the salmon. I probably would have picked up another fish. for the fish flesh right there. I have in the past done what we have right here is calamari, which is squid. It's a little bit more difficult to try to keep it, I wasn't going to fry stuff at the church. It would have smelled the whole place up and that kind of thing. But I would have brought all the dipping sauces and things like that. Maybe some teriyaki fish. The orange roughy that they have at Costco is really good, and you can put that in a garlic butter sauce or a teriyaki sauce, and maybe a little rice to go with it. Anyway, I'm sorry we're not together to do that. I'm not a great cook, so maybe we're not missing out too badly on that. And then I'm sure there are some of you, I know at least 2 of my children, maybe more, won't even eat seafood at all, so they don't like it. So I don't cook it all that much. I never did when my kids were growing up. I did try the tuna steaks. I think these might be tuna steaks right down here. It would have been fun. What I may have done I would have picked up maybe some of the sushi from that Kyoto restaurant. Yo, boy, have y'all been there? That's good sushi over there. I don't even like sushi, and I like it there. Typically, I get the stuff that's got cooked meat in it, but I've had the raw one too, and it's very, very good. So I recommend that place, Kyoto. I assume they're open for takeout. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, so other than that, those of you who joined us for the Zoom meeting last week, we talked about our project that's upcoming. Remember that the last day is going to be a final, and I'm looking really, really seriously at trying to get that final that you can take it through the Google Classroom. In other words, it's not going to be a paper you have to look at, but it can be just something you can answer online. I sure hope I can figure that out, y'all. Y'all pray for me and my technological, shortcomings there. But the week before that end would be our project day. And what we discussed during the Zoom meeting, and y'all all assured me, the ones that were there assured me, that you can get your PowerPoint made at home, and then when we Zoom the meeting, you can share your screen with us and then just talk and share it right then. Cole gave the idea of recording it so that you wouldn't necessarily have to be live when you're producing it, right? Because sometimes, people get nervous and this kind of thing. So you can make your PowerPoint, and then you can go into your PowerPoint, and it says on there's a little button if y'all need me to show you that. I can do that too. I can record a PowerPoint. You can go in there and click record it, and you can talk just like I'm talking into this one right now and tell us what's going on. If you want to play a video, the way that I play videos is by using the program called Bandicam. Then you can just embed those right in there, which is convenient. So y'all be working on that. Remember, you're going to pick a project that has anything to do with marine biology. It could even be the food from the ocean. So if you want to talk about, you could even give us a recipe for some fish or something like that. I'd be totally cool with any of that. At this point, I'm going to take a project, whatever you got. And I mentioned also it's your PowerPoint's only going to be about 5 slides long, right? It's not going to be very long. We don't want the class to go on too terribly long, right? Okay. All right, gang. Well, let me know if you have any questions about that. You can always email me. I am working on those quizzes. Thanks for those who have sent them. And I will certainly get them back to you and try to get a grade to you pretty quick here. I'm sorry I never did figure out that Jupiter thing. But I will get you your final grade to you. At this point, I think everybody's in pretty good shape. All right, gang. See you next week.